My name is William O'Connell. I'd like to welcome you to the MBTA Section 3A Subcommittee meeting for the town of Bellingham. I would like people in the audience to know, and those on TV, this meeting is being recorded. We did not have a full complement this evening on the board, so we were going to hold off until our next meeting to designate chairs and co-chairs. So tonight I'll just be organizing the meeting until we elect chairs and co-chairs. What I'd like to do is start on my left. If you could introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. My name is Jeff Skornavaca. I've been a resident of Bellingham for about 30 years or so. I had previously served on the Zoning Board of Appeals for nearly 20 years. I saw several 40Bs that were before us. So I heard, I think through Facebook or one of the other social media platforms that you guys were looking for someone to, with an interest in this committee, who had some zoning experience. So I thought I could help out.
Great, thank you very much.
My name is Sanjay. I'm the Board of Selectmen and happy to help.
Liz Bertholet, resident for 11 years, and I am currently on the zoning board, formerly planning board, and have about 20 years of experience in commercial real estate.
Amy?
Assistant Town Planner.
Again, I'm William O'Connell. I've been living in town since approximately 1986. Served on several boards, been active in the community, and currently have the pleasure of serving as chairman of the Bellingham Planning Board. At this point, I would like to introduce Amy Quissel of our law firm to give us an overview of what the process is that we're going through tonight. And I want to be clear, Amy, it is a process, correct?
Yes. So I'm not really sure what was on the what was the plan for you guys to do tonight. I'm here to give you an overview.
That's what we like.
Yeah, of section 40A, section 3A, which is sometimes called MBTA zoning. This was all part of the Housing Choice Act that was filed by the governor back in 2021. And what it requires is that MBTA communities have to allow multifamily housing by right. And an MBTA community doesn't have to be a community that has MBTA services. It can be an adjacent community, which is what Bellingham is. So Bellingham is it's considered an adjacent community, meaning you have a different timeline than MBTA communities and rapid transport communities. Your timeline is that you have to have zoning in place by December 31st of 2024. And that zoning has to allow for multifamily housing as of right. That's general for all adjacent communities. And then things start getting a little bit more municipality specific. So an action plan was filed as required under the statute. The action plan was filed, and it has been determined that Bellingham has to provide for 750 units of multifamily housing. And when I use the word provide, what I mean by is that you have to have zoning that allows for 750 units of multifamily housing. That does not at all mean that the town has to actually create that multifamily housing. So I just want to make it clear, our job as the town is to create zoning that allows for this development. Whether the development happens or not is not necessarily, that's not a responsibility of the town. And so what other towns, what other municipalities have done, I'm going to just go through some of the options based on what other towns have done, some of the options that you have when you're designating an area for multifamily housing. You are, Bellingham's in a little bit of an unusual position because you actually are directly adjacent to a train station. However, the area in Bellingham that surrounds that train station, even though it is there's a half a mile radius into Bellingham, that really isn't there's no developable land there. So you are not, even though you are right next to Forge, you're not bound by an area that's a half a mile from that train station. So you can put your zoning anywhere in town. You can also put your zoning in multiple areas of town. So I have one town that decided to put it in the industrial A district. And the reason why they did that is because they already had a large multifamily development there. They had it's a large Avalon 40B. That district also is surrounded on three sides by residential districts that are established single family and multifamily residential districts. So it really made sense for that town. Other towns have done I have another town that did 4 separate overlays. They did 4 overlays in different areas of town where they felt that, that multifamily housing would be compatible with other uses. And by doing that, they were able to parse together enough acreage to get to their target number, which yours is, again, 750. And
Amy, can I
so,
interrupt you for one moment?
sure.
You mentioned a term some people may not be familiar with. Can you expand on what an overlay district is?
Sure. So an overlay district would be a district that we are going to designate that lies over either residential, commercial, industrial, or it can overlay numerous districts. So it can overlay over part of the residential district heading into the commercial district. And what happens with the overlay district is that does not mean that you have to do what the overlay district allows uses for. You can also put in uses that are allowed in the underlying districts. So it actually gives you a little bit more option to have an overlay district. We will not be, unless it's up to the committee, but I haven't yet seen a municipality that has completely developed a whole new district. I've either seen, like I said, a community allow multifamily in an established district or create overlays.
Okay,
Overlays are done quite often. You just did one with the Hartford Ave overlay.
correct.
So they are done very frequently. And the other thing about an overlay district is you can determine the size of the overlay by map and parcels, which is always a little bit helpful to the building commissioner, because when somebody comes in for a building permit, he knows exactly where the overlay is. It's not this line shown on a map, and that line shown on a map correlates with an assessor's lot and parcel number. And so the minimum zone density that the town has to have is 15 units per acre. You can stay at 15 units per acre. You could allow more density if you wanted to. Most of the municipalities I'm working with are sticking with the 15 units per acre. There's one that did more than 15 units per acre. And so what we would be looking at is, what this committee would be looking at is areas in town that would have developable area, would allow for multifamily housing to be compatible with the surrounding area. And then once an area is designated, and then there's also other dimensional requirements that would have to be considered, such as setbacks, height, parking. And then there's also design criteria that we could also look into. I will tell you that every town that I'm dealing with has hired a consultant to help them with the finding the area and the dimensional I call, I call it the math, but, figuring out, once they have an area, yes, we can satisfy the 3A guidelines by using this area, or do we need to add another area, things like that.
Amy,
Um,
I just wanted to mention that even, I believe all of those towns are utilizing grants from MHP. So it
correct.
wouldn't, so it wouldn't cost the town any money, essentially, to hire a similar consultant.
Correct. There's grants that are through EOHLC and MHP. Yes, they are. I think they're facilitating all of those grants.
Does the
And
town have a grant writer or someone
No,
coordinates
so
grants?
from my understanding, when I spoke to someone at MHP, they said either Amy or Dennis Sprain would just need to say, hey, we'd like to engage, we want a grant, we would like to engage with a consultant, and then they would set everything up.
Okay, thank you.
I'm wondering if that's something that we could actually have Jim do.
We can
Because I
approach
think
that.
he's got such expertise on this. I wish I had the expertise. I don't wanna, I don't have the experience to do that. I'm more than willing to do this, but I know we have a time frame of December, so I would be happy to work with Jim or a consultant. But I don't know enough about it at this point to write that, but I'd be willing to help
I
with
would
somebody
think,
that wants
I
to
think
do
it's
it.
pretty, I don't think it's very involved. I think you literally just have to contact MHP. Like,
Okay.
they're making it very easy for municipalities to deal with this because they know it's a huge
It is a huge,
lift,
right.
and it's monetarily, most towns couldn't afford
Right,
a consultant. I don't think you have to write anything
okay,
extensive,
Okay.
but let me talk with Rob, because he was on the call with
okay,
me.
perfect.
So we can,
So maybe we
circle
do
back.
it collaboratively with a few people.
I think we can,
few folks
talk
work
to
together.
Jim.
yeah, Jim
And then
would
once-
probably
Once
know.
we designate officers
Sure,
or chairs,
sure,
give that responsibility to who we designate moving forward.
sure. We could have
I do
Coordinate.
think I think they said it has to be someone who's either town manager or planner, so it can't be someone from the subcommittee to
Mhm.
request it, but,
Mhm.
So if Jim can't do it, they'll.
yeah, well, Jim could probably
We could
walk
work
you through.
together.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
we could
sure.
certainly work together,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay, Amy, continue.
Sure. That was going to be one of my recommendations. There's different firms. There's Horsley Witten, there's Stantec, there's Barrett Planning Group that I've worked with, all with very much success. So I definitely recommend getting a consultant on board. And then I also recommend a public forum prior to town meeting. Now, Amy is correct. We are on a time limit here, and so in a perfect world, I would recommend that the zoning go to town meeting in the spring. And then if anything happens, we still have town meeting in the fall that we can fall back on. If that doesn't happen, it would have to be, it would definitely have to be on the agenda for the fall town meeting. And as of right now, there's been no extension of the deadlines. I have not been made aware of anyone requesting an extension of the deadline. So I'm not sure if it's even, on anybody's radar. So we're all sticking to that deadline and, trying to get it accomplished. So essentially, once you've looked at these areas and you've come up with a draft bylaw, and I recommend a public forum before you even go to your 40A Section 5 hearing. This is a zoning amendment, so you have to follow all of the requirements that you normally would in a zoning amendment. And so, as you know, Bellingham has a little bit of a twist on that, where it has to be sent to the select board, back to the planning board, back to the select board. So, we'd have to make sure that all of the rules and requirements are met. And at that 48 public hearing, the planning board has to make a specific determination that the areas selected or the area selected is an eligible location. And there's been some caution by the Attorney General as to what is an eligible location. The eligible location has to be a location that is desirable to families and children. And so the Attorney General cautioned one town for putting their 3A zoning in an area that also allows for solid waste facilities, marijuana facilities, and there was one other objectionable use that the AG felt was objectionable. I can tell you right now that I do not agree with the Attorney General on this. The legislature specifically stated that the planning board has to determine what the eligible location, if the location is eligible or not. And therefore, I don't think it's the Attorney General's job to determine what is eligible and what is not. In the case that I'm discussing, the Attorney General completely missed the ball that the area that the planning board determined was eligible was surrounded by residential properties. There was, a lot of, there was a shopping center, there was facilities, there was a gym, it was really, a good area for multifamily housing. So that was not struck down by the AG. It was just cautioned by the AG. And so, there is that, but other than that, there's no real, definition of eligible location. It has to be desirable for families with children or families and children. And so at your 40A Section 5 hearing, the planning board will determine whether it's an eligible location or not, and they have to make that determination. That determination is part of your recommendation to town meeting floor. And then other than that, this zoning amendment that will eventually go before the planning board for their recommendation in their 40A Section 5 hearing will go before town meeting, and depending on how it's written, most likely will only require a majority vote.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
Not right now. Again, like I said, it's just a general overview, but if you have any questions, I have been working with, like I said, numerous towns. I'm also working with the Attorney General and HLC on a lot of these things.
You explain to people, if we do not follow through with this process, what type of revenue is at risk?
So there are 13, right now, there are 13 grants that the town will no longer be eligible for. And that is that's unquestionable penalty. That will happen. That is written into the statute. Now, I will tell you that the Attorney General has determined that the statute is mandatory and that cities and towns must comply. And if they do not comply, they could be subject to administrative penalties from the Attorney General's office, and also subject to fair housing claims, etc. Because their deadlines have not happened yet, that hasn't necessarily, we haven't really had much, we don't have a lot of details on whether or not what the Attorney General would actually do. She did send out on March 15th of 2023, she did send out a press release stating that it is mandatory, and if you do not comply, the Attorney General will take action against the municipality. There is one case, it is the town of Holden. The town of Holden has publicly stated they will not comply, and they were sued by a Central Mass Housing Alliance and 2 individuals. And the town of Holden hired myself as special town counsel for them. I defended the case. It was dismissed based on the plaintiffs not having standing. Unfortunately, We did argue during our argument in Worcester Superior Court, we did argue that the statute provides its own penalty, which is no grants. And therefore, you know, the Attorney General has no role in, you know, in penalties of non-compliance. We did argue that, and the judge had, in my opinion, had favorable comments on our side, but the decision, of course, was silent on that because he was able to throw it out on standing of the plaintiffs. That has been appealed, and it is at the appeals court, and it won't be determined very soon. It was just appealed. The decision came down in December, and it was just appealed.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions from the board members? I have a few, but I want to wait. Liz?
Not at this moment. Just thinking.
Yeah, not at the moment.
So I imagine part of our process would be to hire an attorney who's done, not an attorney, consultant, who's done this before, who might make some recommendations based on our existing zone and available.
Yeah, and Amy, you can correct me, but I do believe that there are sort of calculations that need to be involved, and I mean, we're just not equipped to do those, like the engineers and the architects and
And
yeah,
and
so
the
just
planners,
to make
yeah.
sure everything's like dotted and cross their T's. I mean, so I met this woman from MPH at an industry event, and it's 90% of the towns who are facing this legislation have utilized grants from MHP. So we're in the minority at the moment. So I don't see why, if it's a free grant, we wouldn't engage regardless of what the outcome is. At least the consultant would do a lot of the heavy lifting for us.
And I imagine this subcommittee will be open to the public, so if the public wanted to make a recommendation for where or where not this zoning was to be, that they'd have a voice in the process.
They will have at some point during the process. What our goal is, I believe, we want to be as transparent as possible.
Sure.
So when it comes down to ownership of the land, that will be not a concern.
Right.
We're just literally looking at the map and acres.
Yeah.
Who owns it is not relevant at this point in time in the process.
Sure.
Amy, listening to what you said, I think our schedule is going to be important. We're gonna need to have some language drafted. Amy, on the planning board, we need to find out what date is the placeholder for the Springtown meeting.
It's more putting it on the warrant. So let's just say hypothetically, we were to meet every week
Yep.
for the next month, because the warrant had opened, I think it was January 22nd. And if we could, if the intention of the board is to have something for the spring, knowing that it could possibly fail to come back at it in the fall, we would need to get something as a placeholder for the warrant within the next month.
Okay. Then we also have to look at our schedule to determine. Correct me if I'm wrong. It goes from the zoning board to the select board to the planning board, open meeting, then presented to the town. Amy, is that the right gist of? Did I miss something?
No, it doesn't go to the zoning board.
I'm sorry?
Planning board.
It does not go to the zoning board. It goes, I think it goes
Okay.
to the select board, back to the planning board, then back to the select board.
I thought that Bellingham.
Hartford Ave, exactly
Now,
like Hartford Ave.
You guys were going to, amend your rules and regulations. Do you know if you did? Do you recall?
I don't.
Okay, I'll figure that part out. Don't worry. We did it before. We
So
figured.
what we have to do is, between now and I would think next Thursday, look at a schedule of when things have to be done and go from there.
I mean, is that our goal, to get something in for spring?
I think
Sent to the committee.
we can talk that at the next meeting. But here's the concern. If we wait till the fall meeting and we have an error and it does not pass, that's our last shot to go to the town.
Yeah, I just don't see how we'll get done in a month.
we can discuss that at the next meeting.
Okay.
But I think I initially thought, and again, I'm just quarterbacking these meetings this meeting for lack of a better term. I thought we could have meetings before, each planning board. I think we may have to meet for the next few weeks, every Thursday. And we find out what we want to do for at least the next three Thursdays.
I do have some travel in February,
Okay,
so I'll be out of town at least twice, but I'll check my schedule.
but I think, we should look at try to firm a schedule up. Probably set, unless someone disagrees. Our next meeting will be next, Thursday. And then we'll set something up. a
Well,
rough
like,
thought for something,
Calendar.
and go from there.
I should be fine with that.
Is it possible
Yeah, I
Bill,
can
that,
do the first. Yeah.
we do consult with Jim, because I think talking with Jim, he was pretty comfortable with doing this. So I'm not sure if we could use him as that.
I have
consultant
talked to
piece.
Jim as well,
He felt pretty comfortable
He
with
did.
what the requirements were to do this.
correct.
But obviously I don't want to speak for Jim, but, that timeframe may be doable. It may not. I'm not sure, but it's something to explore.
I don't want to, I think we have an opportunity to take advantage of Mr. Cuthbert. If that's an opportunity we want to look at, we can. But we also have to look at the calendar, be very realistic in what we want to do. Again, just one person's opinion. Yeah, we only have 2 shots at this.
Yeah, I mean, I will just say, I know Lexington, it was like 18 months or
Yeah.
almost 2 years. Swampscott, I think it was pretty similar.
Yep,
Amy, I don't know if you have any other examples of timing for some of the towns, but I think, you know, it doesn't seem doable to me. That's my opinion.
we can discuss that.
Yeah,
I tend to agree with you, but my family is, we only got one shot at the apple at that point in time.
just have to make it,
Perfect, I agree.
yeah.
So maybe you'll have a conversation with Jim or one of you guys, and then
I
let's see. what
think that'd be
Jim-
best for Amy to do.
And then
Yeah.
until the next meeting, and then next meeting, it will come up with a little bit more detail. Obviously, Jim was the one to take in the lead on the first place, the one that actually came up with this idea,
Right,
if I'm not mistaken.
He thought of the overlay.
right. He does
Yeah.
have a draft overlay.
Yeah.
It's taking that language
Yeah.
and really looking at like this map and saying which of those parcels would fit into that puzzle. And we kind of know what those parcels are. That's something that I just done quickly with sticky notes. And so it would be the subcommittee to look at those possible options to see what would work and what wouldn't work.
So I'm gonna kind of ask one more time. I think she just explained, Amy. If you don't mind, I'm gonna ask one more question. I know you just explained, but just to make it clear to everyone. While our citizens are watching, and then if they might have any questions. So we will get ready for the spring meeting. If our citizens, they don't want it, and then we'll try it again in the fall. If they don't want it again, it will be the same outcome. So we will still lose all the grants we were supposed to receive. Still, that's the case, am I right?
Correct, at least.
Okay.
That's at the very least, is that you will lose all 13 grants right now. There's 13 grants listed right now, and you will lose any opportunity to utilize those grants. The other thing that I think is important to note is that when you're looking at areas for your zoning, for your MBTA zoning, it does not have to be undeveloped land. It just has to be developable land, meaning that, that you could put, multifamily housing there. The guidelines that were established by, they were set by DHCD, which is now EOHLC. They define developable land as land which multifamily housing can be permitted and constructed. And it's privately owned land or publicly owned land. And it is, it's any land that does not meet the definition of excluded land. And excluded land is publicly owned land, except those that are that are considered developable by the planning board. And then it's rivers, wetlands, protected open space, rights of way, public rights of way, privately owned land, which is in zone 1 wellhead, and privately owned land that is used for educational or institutional uses such as hospital, prison, electric, water, wastewater, or other utility, museum, private school, college, or university. So, you know, any other land that can conceivably have housing on it can be considered in your land area, in your developable land area.
Answer your question.
Yeah. Thank you.
We have some people in the public. Any questions from anyone in the public? Yes, sir. Want to introduce yourself?
Mike Hennessy, 70 Buron Ave. This is for the town council. With all these, oh, this is gonna happen to you, this is gonna happen if you don't do this, if you don't do that. Bellingham has already somewhat come into compliance with that over the past years with our general development. This new law that Governor Healy is pushing, that the Attorney General is threatening these communities over, they're gonna overflow our schools. It's gonna tax our infrastructure. Our public safety is to standards from 2016. So Bellingham gets no incentive out of this, and because we've already done it, but you're gonna withhold funding from this community that's already done the right thing with regular growth. Am I correct in assuming that Governor Healy is going to punish Bellingham for having regular growth that's already happened because we don't have, we can't handle it. We can't handle these units.
So the town of Bellingham is over 10% for affordable housing. And affordable housing has a very minimal role with regard to MBTA communities. In fact, with regard to MBTA communities, only 10% of your zoning can only require that 10% of the units be affordable. There are, again, I have municipalities that are requiring none of them to be affordable. And so, and again, this is not, no one is punishing or forcing the town to create actual dwelling units. It is to create zoning that could allow for dwelling units.
Right, but once we do the zoning for it, somebody's gonna wanna come in and build on it, correct?
I don't know that for certain.
But Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, they would still need to go through the permitting process, planning board. They would still
So
meet.
that, depending on depending on what you come up with for your zoning amendment, most likely, yes, it would be a by right use with some kind of site plan review or design review guidelines. They're not going to be able to walk in and put up a 10-story building with no oversight or design review. But that all depends. Almost every MBTA zoning that I've seen has either site plan review or design guidelines built right in.
Okay, thank you.
Amy,
Sorry.
my apologies.
Sure, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, one second.
Amy, to kind of go over that question Mr. Hennessy has just raised, did you come across similar situations? Obviously, we had quite a bit of growth and or are in the process, or it might be in the process. I know you're talking about the zone and has to be designated for the MBTA. Why those projects cannot be counted on these the growth we are in the process or we had?
Because the difference between three MBTA zoning and 40Bs and the SHI, which is a subsidized housing index, is that 10% is based on actual dwelling units that are on the ground. MBTA zoning is simply just zoning. It's not, you could, conceivably, you could put this zoning in and it never ever takes place. That because a developer decides they don't want to build here, they're going to build somewhere else, or the market gets inundated, who knows? But
Yep.
you are not required to create 750 dwelling units. Under 40B, you are required to create 10% of your year-round housing stock. 10% has to be affordable housing, or you are subject to 40Bs until you get to that 10%. And so that's the difference. This is just this is your zoning for multifamily housing, but if it doesn't happen, there's nothing anybody can do right now based on the legislature as it is now.
I appreciate it for the answer, as I think a lot of people, they want to hear that answer, and actually from you and your expertise, and I think they'll be definitely happy to hear. So just be creating the zoning, but it doesn't mean the project is gonna be taken.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So in essence, two comments. You mentioned, the 750 units that we designate. And let's assume it's approved at town meeting. Down the road, it may be built or not built.
Right.
You also mentioned that how much of it has to be affordable?
None.
That's what I thought you said.
And
So,
if you decide you want to require some of it be affordable, you can only require 10%.
okay. So with that basis, with the density of the building, these projects become attractive to developers. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, if it depends, but your density is going to be determined by this committee.
Correct.
So, you could stick with 15 units per acre, you could do more. It all depends, yes.
Even at 15 units per acre,
Mhm.
that makes it attractive to developers.
For multifamily housing, yes.
All right,
So that's the minimum requirement?
yes.
Okay.
We can exceed that if we want, but that's something this committee would look at. Anyone else in the public have any questions?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Name Trevor Carlson, 12 Cranberry Meadow Road. The 15 units per acre, it's not that you want, they take the acreage of Bellingham and then the average should be 15 units per acre. So if they were to approve one of the zones that you got highlighted, could they build something like that we already have on 140, that's the big condo complex? Or are these gonna be mostly 3-family townhomes?
We don't know yet.
We wouldn't even look at that
We're
because we
just
wouldn't be
looking at
designing it.
It's a piece of property.
Right.
Understood. But it could, in theory, it could be a 200 unit condo block or something like that.
I think
Yes,
we
in
have to,
theory.
we have to meet a minimum of 750 units.
But, Amy, can I ask a question? Even if a developer has land in this zoning overlay, if it gets approved, they could build something under the density, correct? They could build a single family home if that's the underlying zoning.
Yes, provided that's the underlying zoning.
Right, so someone could build a house instead of 200 units. It just depends on who owns it and what they want to do with it. And if they want to go through the process to utilize the overlay district.
Correct.
Does the state give builders some kind of financial incentive to build a higher density complex or more townhomes than a single family? Like, would they be incentivized to build as much as they can on the lot over just a single family home by the state?
I mean, Amy, you can jump in. I don't think the state does, but there are, I think, tax incentives at the municipal level. So like the city of Boston offers tax abatements for developers to build affordable housing, but I don't think the state offers that.
I don't think the state's gonna do any funding on this
Right.
at all.
I actually think I read this morning that that there is something in Governor Healy's budget this year.
Okay.
Oh, good, that'd be great.
But again, don't quote me. I'm not certain. I'm not certain on that, but that, I can't answer that because I'm never on that side. So, I don't know for certain.
One last question from me. Is it fair to say, as we go through this process, that we could be looking at a moving target, that the town could be changing what some of the requirements are and what some of the budgets are as we move forward? That they're growing with us on this process to some
Yes,
degree?
so that is my opinion for all zoning. It can always change, and this isn't actually a perfect example where, we're going along with 40A in our merry way, and we know everything about 40A, and then all of a sudden the legislature decides to, throw a wrench in it and create a new section and create all this other zoning that towns have to deal with. So it's always, in my opinion, it's always a moving target. This is, with regard to the adjacent communities, we are, there are very few actual bylaws that have been approved by HLC. There's quite a few that have been approved by the Attorney General's office, but so yes, we're learning. In fact, I meet with the Assistant Attorney General once a month, and we go over all list of questions. And in fact, this month we're going to meet earlier because we have so many questions. So it's new zoning. We're doing our best, but questions just keep coming up.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from anyone online?
Bill, I think Amy and I can get together, Amy Sutherland and I can get together with Jim and see if we can't get some indication from Jim as to whether or not he's comfortable, serving as a consultant on this or what. So Amy and I can talk and straighten that out
That'd be great.
soon. So we'll do that. And just to Mike's point, I don't disagree with him at all. It's not so much the affordable housing that we've created, but we've created about 600 housing units that have actually been built or under construction right now over the last 5 years. That's why Bellingham's been designated a housing choice community, one of fewer than 100 communities in the state, because of the work that we've done relative to housing. So it is, somewhat offensive, and we did write a letter to the governor's office expressing our concern, the select board did, with the fact that we've done our fair share over the last 5 years, more than our fair share. And we, requesting some sort of relief, whether or not, anything comes forward, who knows? But it's a valid point. It's not so much about affordable housing. I mean, we've created, as more than our fair share to try and help the housing crunch. So I think that's the point, and we've made it. But at the same time, I understand we have an obligation under the law to pursue the MBTA zoning.
Yep.
Dennis, also, I appreciate it for your time. And I think that when we send the letter, and I think, beside the explanation, that we ask governor, if they would like to join us as well, all right? One of our
Yes.
meetings.
Yeah, and Representative Soter has actually reached out to see if there's someone in the administration that would be willing to come down and talk with us. And who knows, I know other communities have expressed quite a bit of concern as well. But we'll see what happens. In the meantime, we do what we have to do.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else?
I would certainly be curious as we go, the state goes through this process, and Amy, as you might, find other towns that have adopted this zoning. I'd be curious what the actual adoption of multifamily units was. So to Mr. Hennessy's point, so it wasn't 750 units, but maybe what percentage, if the overlay is available, do we see 10% of that overlay being used for, just so we can have a realistic assessment of impact and traffic impact on schools, et cetera.
Right, yeah. We'll be in touch with them, periodically. And she may be a common speaker at a future meeting.
Sure.
So, initially I thought we could do this next meeting on the 8th, if we can just look at our calendars and see what, availability we may have on the, well, we can discuss it. We'll either be meeting on the first or the eighth, and we'll let the public know as soon as we can.
Yeah, I can do the first.
Okay.
I sort of feel like we're under pressure
Mhm.
at the moment. You know, we've got a lot of looming deadlines and I'm happy to meet more frequently as my schedule allows. So
Okay.
I can meet on the first.
Okay,
I can first, I
okay,
can meet on the first as well. I cannot meet on the.
okay.
Are we thinking 6 o'clock?
Yes, we are probably here. Okay. And hopefully then we'll have a full complement and we can organize. So at that point, I guess technically for meeting minutes, I need to ask for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second step, we have a motion for adjournment made and seconded. All in favor? Bill O'Connell, yes.
Sasha, Cheyenne, yes.
Elizabeth Lett, yes.
So we are adjourned. I want to thank the public very much for coming this evening. And I encourage you to continue to come in this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.